Hello there, and welcome to the 26th episode of the Bamboo Chalupa Digital Marketing Podcast. My name is Brett Snyder. I am the president of Knucklepuck, and I'm joined by my co-host, Nate Shiver, the author of shiverweb.com.
Howdy.
So something I believe that we've mentioned on the podcast before, but here at Knucklepuck, we actually have a weekly book club where we find a great book that we're reading, somebody's reading, and we come in every morning early on a Thursday and we discuss that. Right now we're reading a book called Made to Stick by Dan and Chip Heath. And one of the favorite things we like about this book is that it has a lot of case studies, has a lot of examples. We always, as marketers, talk about storytelling as a way to get our points across, and really being able to provide case studies has always proven to be a really extraordinary way to do that. And so as Nate and I were trying to figure out what would be a great podcast episode now that we're into, past 25, we're past a year into the podcast here, and we wanted to have an episode that would be really engaging for our listeners. And we wanted to talk about case studies. We wanted to talk about what companies are doing SEO the right way. And we want to look at some of the primary aspects of SEO. We wanted to look at things like technical, on page. We want to look at off page, even complementary things like social media or your offline persona. What we want to talk about today is how successful businesses and brands are using these different aspects of SEO and doing them really successfully, so we can frame them for our audience here in ways that you can understand how to translate these success stories to your own business.
Yeah, and again, all these sites, we're going to have the links in the show notes at bamboochalupa.com so that you can go to these websites and look and see exactly what they're doing to try to take some of these more abstract recommendations and see how they're done in real life. So the first aspect we wanted to look at is technical SEO. So this is making sure that Google, Bing, search crawlers can crawl your site, they can index it, they can understand it. And of all the aspects of SEO, technical is the most abstract in a way. It's very hard to grasp what's going on, but it's also one of the most foundational because you're literally optimizing your website for search engines. And one of the brands that we wanted to call out was Moz. Moz is a leading software brand in the SEO industry. And throughout their history, from their early startup days until their rebranding several years ago, they've gone through some major changes, consolidating some brands, doing website redesigns, even transitioning their entire domain name from seomoz.org to moz.com. And so we wanted to call out some of the ways that they were able to transition and some of the ways that they were able to build on what a lot of times can be pitfalls in the SEO world.
And we're going to talk about this through the lens of a rebrand, whereas what are the technical considerations that you have to know when you're moving from one site to another? But these principles still apply. We want to position kind of Moz's story because, as Nate mentioned, they have gone through a number of different rebrands. I remember, people who've been in SEO for a long time, and that Moz wasn't always a software industry or a software company. They used to do consulting. And I think it was back in 2009, 2010, right, Nate? Somewhere around there.
Yeah.
Where Moz got out of consulting and then focused full time on, things like Open Site Explorer, and Mozscape, these different software elements that I know were pretty central to the way they were able to offer consulting in the first place. But these principles will translate regardless of whether or not you're looking to do a rebrand or you're just trying to understand, am I optimizing my site the right way for search engines? Technical SEO is honestly, it's one of my favorite aspects because it is very process driven. You can take more of an engineering mindset to understand the technical side of things. There are clear and concrete rules, but it is one of the least sexy parts of SEO. It's one of the things that people tend to overlook because it's either overwhelming or it's simply not interesting to them.
Yeah, and one of the things that Moz has done is they used to have all their different learning centers and pieces of software on different domains, different subdomains. And one of the things that they've done is, they consolidated their beginner's guides and their different pieces of software all to one domain that is now moz.com. And if you go to the Internet Archive, you can pull up where they used to have all these different pieces of software on different domains, different subdomains. I think it was like learn.seomoz.org, but they've consolidated all these pieces to one domain. And even though that may sound, like it wouldn't really matter. I mean, why not I know a lot of sites have blog.yourstore.com or shop.yourstore.com, that kind of thing. When Moz was able to consolidate all these different pieces, they saw a ton of success because what they were able to do was consolidate all these different signals that each subdomain had into one single domain, so that now search engines would see Moz.com as the single consolidated site that, people who are previously linking to their beginner's guides, they were linking to their software pieces, all those links, all that content signals were now around one single site. And so the main takeaway here is that just because your developer or just because, someone at your organization says that, oh, this should be a quick fix. We'll throw up a blog over here. We'll throw up a page on, this root folder instead of another root folder. That choices like that can really impact your organization and impact what you can and can't do from SEO from just the very beginning.
Right. And I've mentioned this. I use this a lot of times when I'm talking to potential clients, where there's a huge misconception in the world of, of Google and Yahoo and Bing, the world of search, that search engines rank the web. And they do not. Search engines can only rank web pages from their index, web pages that they have already identified that they retain some sort of a cached version of. And so understanding that and understanding that if you are not in that index, as far as Google is concerned, you do not exist. And so to call out some of the things that Moz did really, really well on this, Nate already talked about consolidating a bunch of different assets, but they also understood that, they got the brand name before they were going to, do the whole relaunch. They actually had it out there. It was crawlable by search engines. It really just had one doorway page, but it allowed them to kind of start seeding the SEO world to start to recognize, hey, this is coming. People started talking about it. They were actually able to tease it a little bit more, and maybe that isn't even as much technical, just more along the lines of the rebrand, but they were able to start to tease the fact that they are going to be consolidating to this one new brand. They also looked at this to say they're getting away from the idea of SEO. SEO Moz, again, used to do SEO consulting. Now a lot of people don't want to call themselves SEOs. They want to call themselves inbound marketers. They want to call themselves digital PR representatives, what have you. But at the end of the day, what Moz started to recognize is that being labeled as SEO Moz could potentially pigeonhole them into one particular vertical, and their software was designed to serve a number of different marketing verticals. And so we talk about exact match domains. We talk about, having keywords in your domain name as being a benefit to rank for certain terms. But Moz also recognizes that technically having the SEO in all of their, in their domain name and in the vast majority of their URLs was potentially putting themselves in a position to be viewed solely as an SEO company. And so this rebrand, more so than just a technical side of things, but it also is indicative of the fact that if you want to pursue SEO for the long term, if you want to pursue marketing and optimization for your website, even if we don't call it search engine optimization, if we simply call it optimization for your website, you want to be able to recognize and understand what is it what impression, what brand are you trying to promote to your audience, that audience including the search engines, and then understanding what that audience is looking for. Again, including the search engines from a technical side of things, to know that all of our signals are consolidated to one consistent URL structure, know that our internal linking is not going through these redirect chains. They had to make sure that they had all of these ducks in a row before they ever actually launched on Moz.com, because once they launch, they realize that that's going to be the massive influx of traffic to the new site. That's where Google and Yahoo and Bing are going to start re-indexing this new site. And then you need to make sure that all of this is done prior to the starter's pistol going off, or you're going to find yourself in a position where you're trying to, to play catch up, or you're trying to address problems that you never wanted the search engines to recognize in the first place.
Yeah, I think having your ducks in a row is a very good way to say how to approach technical SEO. I think the key thing, even if as a business owner or even director of marketing, if you don't want to get into the weeds of, flushing bad URLs en masse or solving redirect change, simply understanding the thought process behind your website infrastructure, behind your subdomain choices, behind your folder structure, understanding how your website is structured and the technology behind it can go a long ways into implementing all the best practices that will get you into the right position when it comes to talking about on-page SEO and off-page SEO, which we'll talk about right now.
Yeah, I think that's a great segue. We talk about technical, just to reiterate Nate's point there, it is the foundation of the way Google or Yahoo or Bing will interact with your site. Remember, SEO is about optimizing for a computer program, a computer algorithm. So you have to have that technical foundation in place. But you also have to know that the content and everything that you put on the page, everything you use to talk about your brand, to talk about your product or services, your competitive advantages, your unique selling proposition. Once you have that foundation in place, it's essential that you have this consistent and consolidated theme around your core capabilities. And that's where we talk about the on-page factors.
Yeah, and I think the best company to look at on-page SEO to see what's the best practices, what can you reverse engineer, is an outdoor company called REI. They retail outdoor goods. And when it comes to implementing on-page content and going beyond, what are our target keywords, going beyond just keyword stuffing into what is our audience looking for? What is some incredible content that we can create, map out, and have on our site that will get us to rank for some of these extremely competitive terms? I think our REI has become a favorite case study in the SEO industry because they're one of the few sites that they will actually outrank Wikipedia for very, very broad terms. And even though, REI is a big company, they're not the biggest company. So they're kind of a small niche retailer that can consistently outcompete, outrank some Fortune 500 companies like, Dick's Sporting Goods or Walmart.com or even Amazon on some queries. And so we're going to dive in and look at the different types of content so that when you go to rei.com, you can kind of reverse engineer and see how they approach content, going beyond just, we should have these keywords on these pages.
And I think what's really important here is, and Nate, you touched on this at the beginning, where REI is an e-commerce store. REI sells products for outdoor activities. A lot of people say that you can't do good content strategy when I just sell products. I'm just a retailer or a distributor. I can't do good content strategy because I'm just selling somebody else's products or I'm selling individual products. There's only so many ways that I can describe this jacket until I'm just, really repeating myself across the 35 different variations that we have. And what's really interesting about the way REI has built their content strategy, and this has been for years. This is not something where they're just coming onto the scene. John Coleman, who actually went to work on Facebook's content strategy after he left REI, was really one of the primary architects here. One of the smartest marketers that I have ever met, and one of the people that I continue to, really admire the work that he's done to be able to do something like this content strategy at scale. And what it really does is it understands the core focus of what a search engine is looking to accomplish, and that is to provide an optimal user experience. A lot of SEOs consider user experience to be an add-on. They consider user experience to be one of those things where, all right, well, once we get the rankings, then we'll worry about the user experience. Now, REI flipped it on its head and said, we need to focus exclusively on providing our users with exactly the type of information that they need to be able to live the lifestyle that they want. REI focuses on their audience lifestyle as opposed to REI's products. Now, when you think about it, if you have an outdoor lifestyle, that is going to be very closely tied to the outdoor products that you use to be able to live that lifestyle. REI understands that. This is not at all a selfless promotion of content here, but what they're writing about, and Nate's going to give a couple of examples of the different types of content, they are writing content that aligns with what their audience is looking to accomplish with the lifestyle that they live. They want to be outdoors. They want to be able to experience, hiking, climbing, biking, water activities. To have the optimal experience in those realms, you have to have great products. And the people who are able to produce these great products are also largely considered to be the experts in being able to determine what goes in to having that type of experience.
Yeah, and one of the sections that to start off with is the REI adventure section. So this is rei.com/adventures. And I think the content that they have on this page really understands the emotional reasons behind why people purchase this equipment. They take the extra step to write for the motivating factors rather than just the nuts and bolts. In fact, a lot of these, you can actually book some of these trips directly from rei.com. So it provides that immediate user experience. If you're thinking about hiking the Grand Canyon, you're going to need to buy backpacks. You're going to need to buy camping equipment, but you're not going to buy the camping equipment and all that until you have planned out your trip. And so REI understands that, the romance and the adventure of hiking the Grand Canyon. They need to break that adventure down into something that's achievable, something that people can book. And they understand that providing that easy user experience will lead to the purchasing of equipment that they retail.
And what I find really fascinating about this is REI's audience is very broad. They're not focusing solely on these lifetime hikers, the people who have hiked the entire Appalachian Trail, or people who have, swam the English Channel, these super intense people who their lives are fixated on these outdoor activities. They have information that aligns with a wide variety of audiences, people who are just getting started into hiking, people who may say, hey, I now am starting to date somebody and she's really interested in hiking. What do I need to know to be able to, to keep up? I really like this person and I want to spend more time with them and this is important to them. They're able to provide information for all different, we'll call it skill levels, but it really is experience levels. All different experience levels that people have with these outdoor activities, so that somebody who maybe has been hiking for 30 years that knows exactly the types of products that they want but are interested in new innovations, versus people who have never bought a pair of hiking boots in their life and have no idea where to start. What is Gore-Tex or what is, should I get leather boots or, should I get ones that are more of a nylon fabric? They have information about expert advice that contains both written and video content. It gives people the education they need to get excited about the activity rather than trying to get people excited about a product. Products are a means to an end. I don't come home from a hike where there's a mountain called Old Rag that we're trying to plan my wife and I are trying to plan a hiking trip to in the next couple of weeks. I don't come back from hikes like that and say, man, I had just an awesome time in these boots today. I said, I had awesome views. It was great to be out there in nature. And I'm able to actually go to work the next day because my feet aren't torn up because I bought the right types of boots. They have this, they break down their content, their educational content into the categories that speak to their users. They talk about climbing or cycling or paddling activities, but they also understand that cycling can mean any number of things. Going through their website, they've got sections for bike commuting and touring, road cycling, recreational, urban cycling, and mountain biking. You go down to something like paddling. To me, paddling activities are pretty straightforward as being not involved in that type of sport. But, there's difference in canoeing versus kayaking versus paddleboarding. There's going to be different questions that I'm going to ask if I want to plan a paddleboarding trip as opposed to potentially a whitewater kayaking. REI understands this and caters their content specifically to these very niche groups so that somebody is able to find exactly the answers that they're looking for regarding the activity, rather than having to just simply look for products and have to understand, hey, this may or may not fit with my particular activity, but I know I need a new pair of, water shoes before I can go on this trip.
And what's so awesome about this when it comes to SEO and getting organic traffic is that this is exactly the type of user problems that Google and Bing and Yahoo are trying to solve. When they come to a search engine and type in a very, very broad keyword, say, paddling or paddleboarding, well, that can mean a lot of things. And so to be able to rank for that query, which has a lot of volume, but doesn't have a lot of intent, or it has a lot of different variations of intent, it can be very hard to rank for that. And that's why often you see just the Wikipedia article. And so if you want to get in front of the biggest audience that you can from an organic traffic perspective, it means that you need to have this type of content that will appeal to all experience levels, but then rapidly, triage, I guess you could say, all the different types of people who are looking for that term into exactly what they're looking for. And you'll see this if you start doing different variations of these terms, you'll see REI ranking for paddleboarding. You'll also see them ranking for how to buy a paddleboard. Then you also see them ranking for the different types of brands of paddleboard. You might also see them ranking for planning a trip for paddleboard. So all this content isn't just creating content for content's sake or for having it on your site for the website visitors who are already there. It's to bring in all these different types of people who are on Google and looking for that. And if you're able to give Google, that exact type piece of content that Google's users are looking for, you're going to be able to get that traffic.
And it reinforces your subject matter expertise and your authority on the topic. And I want to just add one final thing here where on page is not something, and this is where, the great from the extraordinary companies differentiate themselves, where writing great content is only the first step. You have to make sure that content is continually updated. As there are changes to the content, go and make sure that your content is reflective of the newest trends and innovations in that vertical. If you're starting to talk about if the paddleboarding basics have changed, or let's go in a different direction. Let's talk about golf. Let's talk about how, the long putter, the ones that, Adam Scott uses that he anchors against his shoulder, those are going to be illegal as far as the PGA is concerned, I think in the next year or two. Now, if I own a golf retailer and I'm still talking about, PGA rules on, putters, and I haven't updated my content to reflect this change in the regulations, my content is no longer as valuable to the user. When it's no longer as valuable to the user, it no longer receives the same signals from Google. And then as a result of all that, your rankings are going to fall. So people people recognize that link building and off page is a constantly evolving process, but content needs to be viewed with that same consistency in terms of being able to recognize that your content needs to stay updated, that there are going to be changes, there are going to be additions, there's going to be new categories that you want to add, and maybe old categories you want to remove from your content. It needs to be a constant process of editing and re-editing to ensure that everything that you're promoting is consistent with your subject matter expertise and the authority that you're trying to convey.
I like it. Well, let's talk about off page. So this is all the signals that are on your website. But again, one of the primary ranking factors, actually the ranking factor, is what other websites say about your site. And case studies in this aspect of SEO are a bit hard to find just because not everyone wants to reveal or reverse engineer what they're doing well. But there's a few that I want to call out. One, it was shared by BuzzStream, and it was written up about vacations by Marriott. And what I liked about this case study is how it made getting links to your website much more real and much less abstract. It wasn't about going out and getting links or building links or buying links. They did things like targeting newspapers, finding university websites, airport websites, and different types of sites that would have hotel pages or would have pages that would need to link to hotel deals, and doing simple email outreach to ask for inclusion into those. We'll link to it in the show notes. Go read the case study. It's short, concise, but the main takeaway for me was that link building is not a mystical process. It's just a process of researching websites that share an audience with you and have an offer that makes their audience interested in what you have. That might be a piece of content. That might be an offer. It might just be that you really are an outstanding resource for them to link to. Make it a win-win for everyone.
Right. And you want to make sure that the big thing to remember there is that it doesn't necessarily have to be, people get in this marketing mindset, especially agencies that come in, it's like, well, I was brought on to market these products. I need to be able to build links around these products. And really, it comes down to that shared experience that Nate was talking about. When we're going out there, the best campaigns to be able to build links, understand what the audience is really interested in, what that audience is looking for, and providing them something that resonates with that audience. It doesn't necessarily, people aren't that interested in the fact that, this product has X, Y, and Z features that something else doesn't have. They can read that from the product description. The stuff that's actually going to get press and PR are the things that, have some sort of you elicit a reaction from the audience. You have some way that people say, that's really cool, or I didn't think of that, or it's something where like, wow, they're doing something entirely different. And one of the favorite examples that I actually had an opportunity to work on many years ago is a campaign that was developed, largely by a former colleague of mine named Adam Melson. And it was for a company, a client of ours at the time when we worked together, that sold sex toys. And obviously this is more of kind of a risque industry, but the owner of the the site, the founder of the business was an MD, is somebody who has researched kind of the psychological impact of sexual activity, across everything from the elderly to disabled, to married and unmarried folks. Being able to understand that sexual activity is an integral part of our lives as human beings, more so than just from a reproductive standpoint, but also frankly, from an entertainment standpoint, for lack of a better phrase there. And so we sat down and we tried to figure out what are some good ways to be able to generate links based on a more taboo subject that people aren't necessarily really that interested in writing about outside of the super niche folks in that industry. And so Adam came up with this idea that he wanted to do a National Sex Toy Day. And he came up with this idea that if we were able to give away, I think it was 1,000 vibrators, they were willing to give away these vibrators for free on National Sex Toy Day. And we built an entire microsite around that, which the one caveat to that is I believe that the client did not maintain sextoyday.com. So I went to check it out again in advance researching for this podcast, and it is not about this marketing campaign. So be warned for that, anybody that does try to go to that URL. But what was super exciting about this is not only that it was just a giveaway, but that they're trying to bring they kept that focus on education. They kept that focus on the fact that sexual education is something that it goes largely undiscussed, but is still a very integral part in our lives as adults. And so they were able to find, links from major news publications that were just saying, hey, look at what this company's doing. This is kind of crazy. We were able to get links from bloggers that talked about sexual health and wellness, able to get to talk about bloggers that are just talking about, the shock and awe, the things you'll never see, or did you know that there is a National Sex Toy Day sponsored by MyPleasure.com? And this was, as I said, many years ago, and I think the domain has since lapsed, but it had generated a lot of visibility for the client. It generated a ton of links that were able to help us rank for highly, highly competitive terms like vibrators and sex toys. But it did so by not talking about how great a vibrator is or the different product features of, the different types of vibrators. It got people talking about a subject that people typically don't talk about. It gave them an outlet to be able to talk about things like sex toys and vibrators without having people be like, oh man, well, how many of them do you have under your bed? It really kind of redefined the conversation in a way that made it much more accessible and comfortable for a wider audience. And by extension of that, was able to generate a lot of awareness for kind of this idea of sexual education. And I've always found that to be one of the most fascinating off-page campaigns that I've ever personally had an opportunity to be a part of, because it really did tie into that audience focus more so than really having anything to do with the products themselves.
I like that. Well, let's talk about some of our favorite social media case studies. I think for social media, again, we've talked about how it's not a direct ranking signal, but when it comes to marketing, social plays a huge part of marketing, especially on the awareness end, just making people more aware of your product, your site. And my favorite is Dollar Shave Club's campaign, where they used videos and social media to instill a sense of frustration at the status quo of buying men's razors. And it was really interesting to see how social made it so easy to find common ground by leaning on, how people thought you had to buy razors, and to point out the very obvious pain points when it comes to men's razors. Their video where they said, this is a quote, this is also going to give us our first explicit tag on iTunes. They said our blades are fucking great. And that video now has just shy of 20 million views, and it continues to grow. And that's insane. They have 1.9 million likes on Facebook, and this is for a niche razor brand with no celebrity endorsements, no nothing. They just have a incredibly well done YouTube video and a perfectly engineered social media campaign.
And I just kind of want to repeat that for a second, where I don't want that to go, really undervalued here. 20 million views on a video about men's razors, and not even about a particular type of razor. It's like, oh, the new 5-blade, has aloe involved in it and this extra comfort strip, where it's 20 million views just talking about the pain points of trying to purchase razors. Anybody that's had to try to purchase them, if you're at the CVS or the Walgreens or the Rite Aid, you actually have to go and get the customer service associate to be able to unlock them. They have it behind lock and key because these are just such valuable, products that people are going to sell. And Dollar Shave Club flipped it on its head there. It said, it should not be this difficult to be able to maintain a clean shaven face. And they were able to find a pain point and really just go full bore into that and be able to say, I'm going to tear away any of these pre-assumptions that people have about shopping for these products that have largely been established over years of just, as Nate said, the status quo. But 20 million views on a razor brand. Anybody who says that your company is boring or that you have no way to be able to reach your audience, think about the fact that somebody selling razor replacements got their video viewed 20 million times, and that should motivate anybody to be able to start thinking a little differently about the assumed realities in your space.
Well, yeah, and the other case study I wanted to bring up, speaking of very boring spaces, is blenders. So before BlendTech, I would be very challenged to name any company, any brand in the blender space or the kitchen appliance space at all.
Oh, it's been too long since you got married, my friend. Well, now you can name all sorts of appliance brands.
Well, no, I mean, that really is the only time that anyone would ever consider brands in a kitchen store. It's like they got one shot. But after BlendTech, it becomes something where consumers are actually thinking about the brand that they're buying, and they want a BlendTech blender. And of course, they're the ones who started the Will It Blend campaign. They're the ones who they took an iPhone and they dropped it in to their blender. It's not high production value at all. They literally just took their blender, they took a product, and they hit play with it looks like a pretty basic camera, and they just said, "Will it blend?" And they established this whole campaign that's running to this day, just promoting their blenders. And now you can go online. In fact, 1.2 million people watch them try to blend an Apple Watch. And that is insane, because now when people think of blenders, they think of BlendTech blenders. And I think that this is just a really good case study to check out, especially when it comes to production values and the thought process behind it.
And just to go a little bit more into the thought process, what they were trying to do is that's actually a way for them to talk about their product features without talking about their product features. They want to be able to say that we have this industrial grade equipment that it's going to be able to solve. I think one of the first ones they did, if I remember correctly, is they tried to blend a bag of marbles. And they wanted to show that this is not going to snap the blades. This is not going to ruin the product for you. We have built these BlendTech blenders to be able to blend anything. And one of the things that I really like about this is it lets them go outside of the will it blend would be, it's always interesting to say, what are you going to drop into a blender? But it also allows them to kind of newsjack a little bit, to hop on some key trends. When there was all that buzz about Hillary Clinton using her personal BlackBerry to send, government emails, BlendTech actually produced a video that said, "Will it blend Hillary Clinton's emails?" Now, obviously, they can't drop any emails in there, but they dropped in a BlackBerry. And when they dropped in the BlackBerry, it blended as everything else that they've dropped in there. And 86,000 people viewed that video. Some of them maybe just wanted to see the BlackBerry. Some of them were just interested about, what are you talking about? You can blend Hillary's emails? It was able to capture attention on something that's it's very fleeting. Attention is very fleeting, especially online. And they were able to almost, transpose this campaign to go after trending topics and even ways that is not specifically within the constructs of the traditional campaign, where they're not blending anything, but they were able to still take advantage of these hot button topics and capture visibility, capture kind of brand attention in a highly scattered and fragmented world that is the internet.
Well, let's finish up our case studies by talking about something that might be a little counterintuitive, but I think we've discussed it before, but about how your offline marketing efforts can directly impact your organic digital efforts.
And what we're talking about here is we're talking about people who have primarily internet businesses, but there is always, at the end of the day, there's always some sort of connection with an actual human being on the other end of their computer. This computer is still a means to an end, but especially if you're buying a product, eventually that product needs to reach the consumer. If you're offering a service, maybe that means that there's a technician or a contractor is coming to your home. Sooner or later, there is some sort of an offline interaction with your brand, unless you have a solely internet business, but those are frankly quite rare. But there is some sort of offline interaction with your brand. And people typically will discount this from an internet marketing standpoint because they say, hey, what happens offline isn't going to impact what Google's going to do. But you can talk about ways that this can actually generate buzz, this can generate PR, it can generate links, and provide you with fodder for content on your site that are based around these interesting things that brands are doing off page. And I know one of the ones that Nate and I have definitely talked about offline to kind of bring this full circle and talk about one of our offline conversations here. And that has to do with, for one of these examples that we want to talk about is a brand like Apple.
Yeah, and it's interesting how brands like Apple are hyper focused on the small things that have big impact, like the packaging. I mean, they spend so much time focusing on making sure that the packaging gives you that adrenaline rush when you open it up. In fact, Gizmodo even has a piece on how Apple has package designers who all they do is sit around and recreate the package opening experience to try to make sure that it has that Apple brand feel. And it's something that translates online. I mean, there's a whole industry on YouTube of the unboxing vloggers on YouTube. And I mean, you get press write-ups about incredible things like having a package designer. And so, even though Apple is, the world's biggest brand, I think it's interesting to reverse engineer the things that they do to stay on top as the world's biggest brand, taking care of these small details that even though they're offline, they have these online implications.
And make no mistake about it, Gizmodo didn't just happen upon this, where Apple made it very clear. They had a subtle marketing campaign to get people to talk about the fact that there is, packaging is important. Anybody who's ever bought an Apple product knows that it's not difficult to open the packaging, but it's not something where it just flips open on its own. It is able to build kind of a sense of suspense as you're opening it without frustration. And that's a very fine line and something that most people don't think about. But Apple was able to do that. Then they plant the seed with their digital PR team to be able to say, this is something that we want people to talk about. We want people to know. It's one of those things where marketing is all about making sure people understand every little thing that makes you special. And that's where these offline things kind of translate into what Apple's been able to do. We said Gizmodo is writing about it. There's a ton of other VentureBeat, I think, had written about it. There's a lot of folks who are talking about these dedicated box openers on Apple's team because it's something that they want the world to understand about the attention to detail they have with their products.
Yeah, and you don't have to be the world's biggest brand like Apple. You can actually build your brand from the ground up on these offline initiatives. That's how Zappos started, by turning the primary pain point of e-commerce, which was shipping and being able to return things, into a competitive advantage. They made shipping free both ways. And they understood that was the primary thing keeping people from not just ordering from them, but ordering online, period. And they were able to reposition that into an entire business and are now, the world's largest online shoe retailer and end up getting actually bought by Amazon.
Yeah, and again, we're going even smaller. Nate kind of goes, you don't have to be one of the world's biggest brands, and then gives an example of the world's biggest online shoe retailer.
They started out small. That's what I'm saying. They started out small. They built it on top of that. But yeah.
They did. No, of course. And I think what we're trying to get at here is to understand what the pain points are and understand that all the little things that go into your product, even if it's not go into your product, not into your website, but go into your product. My wife is a big fan of StitchFix, which they tell you all kind of your fashion, your fashion sense and kind of the style that you like. And they send you a package of clothes. I think there's like 4 or 5 different products that come in there. You're required to buy one of them. So they know that you're going to get you to keep some. It's how they make their money. But they rely on this kind of the actual packaging process to scale personalization of that fashion. They ask you to tell you what you liked when you send something back. What didn't you like about it? So they can say, I didn't like the horizontal stripes. It's like, well, I'm not going to send you horizontal stripes anymore. Or I didn't like the large necklaces, the large beaded necklaces. Oh, good. So you want something maybe a little bit more classic, a little bit more subtle. Good. We know that for next time. These are ways that they're able to kind of translate that online to be able to promote this brand that is focused on personalization. And something like fashion is an intensely personal experience. You can have something where there are fashion trends and there's, tons of bloggers out there that talk about emerging trends, but your personal fashion is an intensely intimate experience that you create yourself. And a company that is essentially trying to monetize personalization of fashion needs to understand what that is. And they don't do that by asking you to go back to the website. There are ways that you can do that right from the products in the packaging. So these are ways that they can work to evolve their understanding of your preferences and to be able to provide you with a better online experience based on feedback that you've provided from your offline experience with the products themselves.
All right. Well, you can find links to all the case studies and all the websites that we mentioned on our website at bamboochalupa.com. You can also find previous episodes and our contact information there. But if you don't want to miss another episode, please go subscribe to the podcast in iTunes or your favorite podcast app, and do leave a comment and rating while you're there. We learn a lot from your feedback, and it helps others to discover the show. So for Brett Snyder, I'm Nate Shiver. Thank you for listening.